Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings. Dan is back. I'm joined today by Dan Schneier, and we've got Dan's Dynasty Takes. We're talking 2024 Giants rookies because every time he's here, we have to talk about the Giants. We're talking 2025 QBs. And I'm going to have Dan do my job for me and help me rank some guys in Dynasty that I'm having a hard time. And then we will have some of your questions for Dan. I have some questions already, Dan, from Blue Sky. Some people wanted to ask you things. They can't ask you things there because you're not there. So we're going to ask you these things over here on YouTube and on the podcast. How have you been, Dan? It's been a long time.
I've been great. This is that time of the year, I think, where at least from judging from just like working at this job so long and seeing the numbers, Heath, where some people do tune out from redraft, they're out of it, their season's over, but Dynasty is always there. And that's what's the best, to me, the beauty of Dynasty. Like I was looking at a few of my Dynasty rosters last night, trying to kind of create some situations where I'm like, all right, well, I need to make a move on this roster at some point. And that point is now, one way or another. And I think that's the fun part about Dynasty. You can kind of make your declarations on players. You can have your feel for how they're going to play out over the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And then you could put your money where your mouth is essentially and make moves for those players. And whereas in redraft right now, you're kind of stuck in whatever situation you're in. You're either making the playoffs, you're getting your bye, or you're just totally done.
I have so many redraft teams that are win and in, lose and out this week, which tells you it's not been a great redraft season for me. The conventional wisdom of don't draft these old running backs turned out to be the dumbest thing that you could possibly do in redraft this year. And so I'm paying for that. But I do have a dynasty situation. Before we get to your questions, this was not on the rundown. Dan's not prepared for it. Jacob Gibbs started another dynasty league this offseason called Tight End University. It's a tight end premium league where you must start 2 tight ends. And almost everything has just worked out so perfectly for me. During the draft, he traded me his 2025 first to move up 6 spots so he could draft Dalton Kincaid in round 1.
Okay.
It's, again, tight end premium, and we had different thoughts about Dalton Kincaid a few months ago than maybe we do right now. I took Jamar Chase with the pick that he traded me. Jacob currently has the number 1 pick. I am 1 win away from the playoffs. But again, winning in, losing out. I have 3 first-round picks next year. Damn. So I thought, Jacob has Rico Dowdle, and he has Dalton Kincaid, who we expect to come back at some point. I've never done this before, because I've never really been in this situation. What I want to do is offer Jacob, and you don't like my trade offers a lot, so you're a good sounding board. I want to offer him a conditional first for Rico Dowdle and Dalton Kincaid.
How do you do conditional first in Dynasty?
I'm going to
down that path.
I have 3 firsts.
Okay.
So I'm just going to include the first that I think will be the worst first.
Okay.
But the deal will be, if I lose this week and miss the playoffs, he gets my worst first. However, we'll figure out when we get closer to the draft and we'll swap those picks. He'll get my worst one. If I win this week and make the playoffs, but don't win at all, he gets my second first.
Oh, this is good.
And if I win the whole thing, then Jacob gets his first back, which will be the first pick overall.
And it will be Dowdle and who?
Dalton Kincaid.
And Dalton Kincaid. Interesting.
I think he would definitely do that for the first pick overall next year.
Oh, yeah, for the opportunity to get that. Yeah. And at worst, he's going to get your second best. Well, assuming you win, he can get your second best first round pick. That's the issue, though. It's a little risky. So, we did a trade recently in Dynasty. I gave you my first round pick for Connor and Kelsey, one that I'm already, to be quite frank, regretting, only because I have Jonnu Smith and he's basically outproducing Kelsey. So the point of that deal has not really worked out, and Connor is not even starting for me. So I don't really know why I did that deal. It felt good at the time, and I wanted to make a push for the playoffs. And I was like, let me just go all in. I'm in second place here with the most points. But in this trade, Jacob has to give up a piece that could be worth it. That could be a big part of his future, maybe, with Dalton Kincaid. Dowdle is another story. I'm not really sure how I feel about him long-term in fantasy, in Dynasty, I should say, but he has played well, and they have committed to him, and it's not like they have any backs behind him. So I feel like it's a little too risky for Jacob, in my mind, for his future, to give up a first, which could be your worst first, for 2 players that could be pieces in Dynasty.
Cousin Ernest says a great point. Love Jacob. He's such a gambler.
Yeah.
And as Jacob would say,
he is.
who cares if it doesn't work out? We're gonna die anyway, right?
You would say that.
Let's get to 3 questions for Dan. I want to start with your thoughts on the dynasty values of Tyrone Tracy, Malik Neighbors, and Theo Johnson, this Giants rookie class. It's been up and down for these guys, but how are you feeling? Let's start with Tracy, and I'll kind of, as we go through each player, this is going to be a long first question. I will tell you where I have them in Dynasty. Tracy's right around RB20.
I think that's a fair point for him. So the thing with Tracy is, as we move forward, the Giants are a 2-win team right now and seem unlikely at this point after losing Dexter Lawrence to win more than one game, if anything, down the stretch. So I'm using that to say it's almost impossible to me. I would say it's 15% at best that Dable returns to this team. So they're going to be undergoing a coaching change, potentially a general manager change, potentially a quarterback change. Will that be an upgrade? That's hard to know. You can draft a quarterback in round 1. It doesn't always work out that way for your fantasy team. So there's a lot to unpack here. Tracy, part of his value over this last 5-week stretch has been that Dable has committed to him as a workhorse back until he fumbled 2 weeks ago and then came back to him in the red zone this past week, showing faith in him. So you're going to lose that potential, the potential role. You might make up for that, though, if the next head coach and the next quarterback can utilize him in the passing game. This is something we were hoping to see from Tommy DeVito when he came in, based on the usage he used with Saquon Barkley in the passing game last year, and it just didn't happen. It's not part of this offensive scheme. That may change, and he is potentially a weapon in the passing game, similar to, the player I comped him to coming out, David Johnson, from the Cardinals back in the day when he was like in his prime before the injuries. So I still really like the talent, Heath. I think he's flashed in a lot of ways: yards after contact, yards before contact, breakaway speed. On one of his touchdown runs, I think the 47-yarder, he hit over 21 miles per hour. That's not something that was guaranteed. He ran a 4.46, but he didn't always look that way on tape in the Big Ten. So I think he's flashed the traits that are necessary. So I would be maybe a little bit more bullish on him. Maybe I have him a little higher, but RB20 seems fair to me.
I think he's exactly the type of back who, like, I want to buy cheap and I want to sell expensive. And you mentioned it, like, regime change matters so much. He'll probably move up 5 spots if the Giants actually do keep their GM and head coach.
Yes.
Because those types of running backs, when the regime change happens, can just disappear no matter how good they were. It doesn't seem to matter, guys. Just like, yeah, he's a 4th round pick, a 5th round pick, a 6th, like, I don't care. Let's go get a good running back. Let's talk about Malik Neighbors, who is still, for me, wide receiver 3. Was basically wide receiver 3 in redraft for the first month of the season and has been a wide receiver 3 in redraft ever since. How are you valuing Malik Neighbors?
I haven't lost faith at all in Malik Neighbors. So there's been some things with Malik Neighbors. Post-concussion, he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3, actually. And he hasn't looked as explosive, I guess, as people would hope he looked after the catch. And that's based on his tape at LSU. Now, there are factors for that. The first one being the Giants aren't throwing a lot of touchdowns. They have the worst quarterback situation in the NFL. The second one being, if you look at the tape, defenses have adjusted to what they've seen from this scheme in the first half. What I mean by that is you're seeing a lot more bracket coverage and cloud coverage over the top of Malik Neighbors. When he catches a ball underneath Heath, there are 3 bodies ready to converge on him. It's really hard for him to make yards after contact. And this goes back to what I predicted back in April when I mocked him to the Giants in my only mock draft for CBS Sports. I said his rookie season is going to look a lot like Jalen Waddle's rookie season. And that was a 4-touchdown rookie season for Jalen Waddle. After week 3, when Malik Neighbors already had 3 touchdowns, Heath, people were like, oh, well, this is going to be a terrible prediction. Now he has 3 still, and 4 is looking to me likely. I'd be shocked if he scores more than 1 touchdown the rest of the season with Tommy DeVito or Drew Lock and the attention he's getting. So I don't know if you can look at this year as a framework for what it will be for Malik Neighbors, because there's going to be an upgrade in quarterback, you hope, you expect, and there's going to be an upgrade in offensive line. They're not going to lose their first 2 like they're starting left and right tackle like they did this year every year, you hope, as well. Now, the question remains, will they go with defensive or offensive coach and the new regime? And that could really impact him. But ultimately, I buy into the talent, Heath. I buy into what we saw earlier in the season when he was absolutely dominant. And I'm okay with ranking him that high. There's risk in this for Dynasty. They may never fix quarterback. It may stay bad. You don't know with NFL teams. You'd rather take a receiver with a locked-in quarterback. But I really believe in the talent, so I'm sticking with it.
Theo Johnson, the other rookie, flashed a little bit right before he was knocked out for the season. Is he the number 1 tight end or number 2 tight end for you in this class?
He was going into the draft before any team drafted him. And that was something we talked about on last year's Dynasty show. I remember we were having that discussion. You're like, I got a surprise guy at tight end too. And it was Theo Johnson. And no one was talking about him at the time. And it's basically based on the upside, right? He's the most athletic tight end from a combine standpoint in the NFL since Jimmy Graham, with very similar comp to Graham. Doesn't play like Graham, very different players. Now, I think this one, Heath, is also dependent on the regime. I'll be honest with you. I'll tell you why I said that. The Giants regime, assistant GM Brandon Brown, kind of scouted, locked onto Theo, drafted Theo, made him a priority. And then we saw this season, the Giants hired a tight end coach who used to work with Theo and has a background. So he played him almost 100% of the snaps right away, essentially. Not 100, but in that high 85, 90% range right away in week one. And that's been the case all year. If that changes and they bring in a new coaching staff and regime, will Theo have that same role? So I think this is one of those situations where you hope, if you have Theo Johnson in Dynasty, the Giants win 2 or 3 games down the stretch so they could keep Dable and Shane in.
The interesting thing is, if they win 2 or 3 games down the stretch, it probably means they can't draft a rookie quarterback.
Well,
so maybe the best case scenario, because they can just go get Jameis, and Malik Neighbors can be the wide receiver one, and Theo Johnson might be a top 5 tight end. Because
no matter what happens, I really hope the Giants sign Jameis Winston this offseason.
So that brings me to question number 2, which kind of feels like question number 6 at this point. But Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders?
For Dynasty?
I was really interested to see how you were going to answer that question, whether you'd answer it for Dynasty or you'd answer it for the Giants.
For Dynasty,
is it a different answer?
It could be. I will be honest with you, Heath, during the season, I don't have time to watch tape. So any evaluation I have of these quarterbacks right now is just based on eye test and watching them on Saturdays and traits that I see from watching them. So
that's good. We'll take it.
Yeah. So I think for Dynasty and Fantasy, it's Cam Ward without a doubt, based on the skill set he offers and brings to the NFL. For the Giants, it's currently Shedeur Sanders is my lean.
Okay. So you think Sanders could be a better NFL quarterback and Ward could be a better fantasy quarterback?
Yes. I think for what I'm looking for a quarterback, which is, can you keep the offense on time, in rhythm? Can you get the ball out with anticipation? Can you have repeatable accuracy based on your throwing motion and mechanics? It's Sanders for me.
So I saw a mock draft recently that had Hunter and Sanders going 1 and 2.
Okay.
And the Giants having the 3rd pick. And Cam Ward went like 17th in this mock draft.
Ooh.
Are the Giants in such a position that if a quarterback's worth going in the top 17 picks, they have to take him at 3?
Well, this is the dynamics of the NFL, Heath. If they bring back Shane and Dable, or even if they just bring back Shane, there's that pressure to take a quarterback, because if your job is on the line, you can take a quarterback and say, well, you got to give me at least 2 years to see this out, right? But if they don't take a quarterback and they fail again and they're a 2-3-1 team, it's very easy to fire the GM. So I think this is the crux with sports. We see this a lot. Dave Gettleman did this with Daniel Jones in 2019, and we might see it repeat itself. It's an ugly cycle for fans of the team, but you understand it from that general manager standpoint. So I do think they will be drafting a quarterback this year. I'm not sold it will be Ward if it's not Sanders, though. That's the thing. Ward is that consensus kind of 2-1-2 guy right now, based on like the hype, the media, what he's doing on the field in the ACC. But I don't know if NFL talent evaluators and teams like the, general managers, teams of high up see it that way. He came into this year as more of a round 2, round 3 pick before his time in Miami.
One more question. We'll get away from the Giants. Tone on Blue Sky asks, in all caps, and I think maybe in at least one league, you're dealing with this question. What do we do with Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Pitts just had his lowest snap count of the season, Heath. What are we, week 13, and that's happening? That's not a good sign. And when asked about it after the game, Raheem Morris was basically like, we'll look into it, and we'll look into if it's based on the game plan or if it's based on the player and what he's putting out there. That was a really eye-opening quote for me. It's like, wow, this could be based on the tape that they're seeing from Pitts, and they're not happy. I mean, he doesn't offer them much in their run game. They run outside zone. He's not a help there. So that's a problem, staying on the field. This was it for me, Heath. If he wasn't going to make it with Kirk Cousins, who has made it for a lot of tight ends, he wasn't going to make it at all. And it's weird because you'll see his highlights are still flashes. Like the time he took that like little inbreaker over the middle and housed it a couple weeks ago, I was like, wow, that's the Kyle Pitts I saw at Florida, right? But overall, it's 1 or 2 flashes. It reminds me a lot of kind of, I don't want to bring it back to this, but like fans getting excited about Daniel Jones when he has a flash of good play, but there's like 5 bad games mixed in with it. You got to look at the overall picture here, and the overall picture for Kyle Pitts is not a pretty one. So I've held on for longer than most have, Heath, longer than most should when it comes to Kyle Pitts, and I'm finally at my wit's end with it.
I think I offered you a second earlier this year. I think I offered you a first last year, maybe.
Yes.
I
was like nowhere close to taking a first last year.
I'd probably give you a third right now.
Yeah, and then at that point, I'm just like sitting on it.
It's just going to keep getting worse.
It should.
Or maybe it'll get better at some point. Let's take a short break, and we're going to get into some mind changers before we get to my Dynasty rankings. So I've really cleverly titled this segment, Have They Changed Dan's Mind or Are They Sells? And I want to start with a pair of young quarterbacks, Will Levis, Bryce Young, and I think it's kind of a different thing because Bryce Young, in my opinion, has played legitimately good football the last 2 weeks, and the fantasy production's been okay. Will Levis, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, is producing fantasy points in a way that I thought that he might, but it's also a way that greatly resembles Jameis Winston, which is great for fantasy, maybe not for the NFL. Have they changed your mind at all, or do these couple of weeks of good play mean it's a great time to sell them?
I'd say one has changed my mind. The other is still a sell for me.
Okay.
So I'll start with the one has changed my mind. I don't know if I want to say change my mind, but yeah, it changed my mind because I was worried it could be over. And that's Bryce Young. And Bryce Young is finally playing the football that everyone expected him to play when he entered the NFL. And what I mean by that is what he showed from a trait standpoint at Alabama was the ability to keep an offense in rhythm and on time. And I bring up those terms a lot. For me, they're the number one most important thing for quarterback play. It's the only thing that can bring you consistency. It's the only thing that can keep a passing game consistent. And the way to do that is to throw with anticipation and to throw receivers open. Don't wait till they're open to throw the ball. Throw it into space and let them run under it. And that's what Bryce Young is doing on tape. I watched both of these games on film, the Tampa game and the Kansas City game. And he has more anticipatory throws on his tape in those 2 games than most quarterbacks have, probably over a 6-game sample size. For some quarterbacks like Daniel Jones, it's basically over like a career almost from an anticipatory throwing standpoint. It really is that vast and that serious. He was pressured 19 times against the Bucs. Todd Bowles kind of just brought the house and said, let's beat Bryce Young the way we've beaten him in the past. And that was the 3rd most ever for a game in a league. And that week in the league. And he took just 1 sack. And he had the 4th quickest time to throw. So what I saw on tape was his ability to kind of use his agility, I would say, his lateral agility to avoid sacks, to duck under sacks, to sidestep, and then get the ball out. Sometimes it was Jonathan Brooks in the flat. Sometimes it was deeper throws. His ability to kind of work that intermediate middle right now is really impressive to me. He's throwing that ball with anticipation, and he's throwing it into space, letting the receivers run open. So everything I see from Bryce is telling me that he can be a long-term fixture for Carolina if he continues to play like this and if he continues to take those strides. As far as fantasy goes, it's still not a profile I love, Heath. I'd have to see them really get a lot of weapons and improve their offensive line. It becomes that like, what's like the profile I could say it becomes like? It's kind of like a
Derek Carr.
It's like a Derek Carr, but he throws a little bit more aggressively than Carr. Like he'll take wind shots that Carr hasn't always been willing to take. But it's that profile of not going to get much in the rushing game, so you really have to be super efficient in the passing game. Now, as for Will Levis, like you mentioned, his skill set's a bit more fantasy friendly. He's taking shots downfield. They're running bootleg to the opposite shoulder, and he's ripping a ball. But like there is no timing still to that offense. There is no rhythm in that offense in that passing game. He doesn't complete passes. Like he doesn't use the middle of the field the way I need him to. I have no faith in him long term being an NFL starter. This run might get him 1 more year with Tennessee. I could be wrong on this, but it's just not my type of profile at all. And I have no faith. I would sell him in Dynasty for sure. I've been trying to sell him. I have him on one roster. I got him super cheap in a startup last year. But I haven't been able to find a good deal yet.
Let's talk about Jaden Daniels, a guy that we had some concerns about his ability to stay healthy in the NFL. Right. He has produced as a top 6 fantasy quarterback so far this year. Have you seen anything from him that's made you feel better about his ability to stay healthy? Or now that he's really delivered on the potential that he has, are you ready to sell?
I'm not ready to sell with Jaden Daniels, even though that risk remains. I'll say this. To answer your question, Heath, I do feel like And this was something that I did see on his LSU tape as the season went on. He did a better job of protecting himself as the season went on. I think he's done an even better job of protecting himself with the Washington Commanders than he has even in that second half of LSU. So I think he's making concerted effort. Like, he understands that he can't just do what he did. Like, there were times like during his LSU tape from 2023 at the beginning of the season where he's just like pinballing into defenders, going headfirst hard. Like, he knows he can't do that at the NFL level. But at the same time, his style of play does lead to potential for injury long term. He has to be an outlier, like we talked about before the draft, to stay healthy at that size. So you're banking on an outlier. Like, trying to think of the best way to term this, Heath, from like a gambler standpoint, it is probably a good move to trade him at this point. Like, because he has shown that he can be QB1 upside from a points potential if healthy. And if you're just looking at it from like an outlier standpoint, he's likely to have to deal with injuries in his career. I just have trouble, Heath, when it comes to this stuff like predicting injuries. I don't really believe we're good at it. I don't think there's any science to it. And I think mostly it's luck based.
So I think we'd all agree Lamar and Josh Allen over Jaden Daniels in Dynasty.
Yes.
Then it gets really interesting.
Right.
But I know you're not a Jalen Hurts guy, but Jalen Hurts has the body probably to stay healthy and continues to score double-digit touchdowns and produce like a top 3-4 fantasy quarterback. Patrick Mahomes has just stayed there because of his longevity and elite upside. And then Joe Burrow has been better than almost all these guys whenever he's had T. Higgins and Jamar Chase this year. So how would you rank Daniels, Hurts, Mahomes, and Burrow in a dynasty league?
I think it's crazy, Heath, but like, I still have Mahomes first. And I know it's ridiculous sounding. And I know they've been so conservative on offense this year because they have been able to be with Spags' defense, and because Hollywood went down and Bryce went down. And these are things that might not happen every year. Like, not every year the Chiefs going to get this unlucky from an injury standpoint at receiver. I think they had a vision for what they wanted to do on offense this year, and it's not possible because of these injuries. And you're going to start to see it hopefully down the stretch now that Hopkins is getting more like used to this offense, and it's a decently hard offense to pick up, and it requires a lot of timing. So I still have Mahomes 1. I would say 2 is Lamar probably for me. And who were the other guys you mentioned?
Well, Josh Allen.
You know what? I take it back. Mahomes is got to be 3. I can't put Mahomes over Josh Allen and Lamar. Okay. It's a ridiculous statement. So let me put Josh Allen 1, Lamar 2, Mahomes 3. And then
Hurts, Burrow, Daniels.
I'll go Burrow 4. I just can't get over how good he is as a passer and his ability to anticipate. I will go Daniels 5.
You hate Jalen Hurts.
I'm not high on Hurts. No.
I know.
And things are only going to get worse for Philly. They're only going to have cap situation. Offensive line's getting older.
Every year, like, he just continues to do the same thing. And you got, like I said, beginning of the year, I don't know if you remember this tweet, but I was talking about, like, we don't know who QB2 is. And I called, I think I called Allen the advanced stats QB2. Okay. And I called Burrow the narrative QB2. And I called Hurts the underrated QB2. And everyone flooded my mentions with Jalen Hurts is not in this conversation, which, to my point, like, that's why I said he's the underrated QB2.
To be fair, I definitely think that I misinterpreted that tweet as I replied to it, because I thought you were talking about real life QB.
I was.
Oh, you're talking about real life QB, not fantasy.
I mean, the guy, how many years in a row does he have to? I mean, not in a row. Last year was a bad year. How many years does he have to, like, what if he goes to the Super Bowl again this year? And he finishes the year with 40 touchdowns like he's on pace for again this year.
Yeah.
And he's averaging 8.2 yards per attempt.
Sneaks from the one. Like, are we really counting that as like you're doing a great
Patrick
job?
Mahomes can't do that.
I know. But like,
Lamar Jackson can't do that.
I can't look at 14
Jaden
rushing
Daniels
touchdowns from the
that.
1 yard line like you're doing a great individual job here. I agree that no one's trying it. But I actually think a lot more quarterbacks could do that if they were.
I think Josh Allen could do it for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of quarterbacks, if they had a good push up front from their O-line, could just do that.
It was supposed to be, it won't work anymore because Jason Kelsey's not there.
All I know is when I watch Hurts, I don't see much passing over the middle of the field. I don't see much rhythmic passing at all. I see one-on-one shots to A.J. Brown and run plays. And I don't know how I could ever put that anywhere near QB2 for me. Real life, not fantasy.
Trey McBride. Speaking of somebody, like you were down on Trey McBride at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, from a fantasy standpoint, let me be clear.
In your defense,
yes,
he has not scored a touchdown all year long.
Reason for being down on him, correct?
But without a touchdown.
He's still amazing.
He's averaging 15 fantasy points per game.
Yes.
Much better than Sam Laporta, much better than Travis Kelce, much better than Mark Andrews. And I think with any other player would say 0 touchdowns is ridiculous. This guy should be tight end 1 right now. Has Trey McBride done anything to change your mind this season?
He definitely has. I mean, look, the main reason me being against McBride was the touchdowns. Never was a touchdown scorer. Kyler Murray, not a great red zone thrower in my mind. Just can't see the field very well in the red zone at all. We've seen that with McBride. He was wide open, and Murray just didn't see him once this year. I think that happened at least once. I don't really think the touchdowns are really ever coming. Like 5 would be my cap for a season for him. So there will be limited upside. But in this tight ends landscape, Heath, that's tight end 1. All you need is receptions. All you need is yards. And he has changed my mind with his ability to not only uncork and get open, but after the catch. That's where I think he's been even better than he was at Colorado State. I really see a difference maker after the catch that I wasn't sure he'd be coming into the NFL. So he has changed my mind from that standpoint as a yak guy, as a guy who can get our fantasy team's yards and obviously receptions. The touchdowns, though, I personally don't think it's a regression thing. I just think this is going to be what it's going to be every year with Kyler.
I think it could be both. He's going to be a low touchdown guy.
Yeah.
And 0 touchdowns on 73 receptions is still
crazy.
A regression. It's still a regression thing, especially when you consider the number of times that Trey McBride has been standing wide open in the end.
Yeah, I know.
Like at least once per game.
But Tyler can't see him.
They just don't cover him, and maybe they should change the color of the end zone or something. One more.
Maybe they should give Tyler cleats that have that add 5 feet to his reach.
Not a player question, but a position question. You and I both have leaned on everybody, really. Wide receivers and quarterbacks in Superflex Dynasty leagues. This has been the year of the running back.
Yep.
Is this something that changes anything moving forward, or is it just? And it's also been the year of the older running back. Has anything changed moving forward, or is it just a 1-year blip, and we're going to be able to take advantage of this in the future because people are going to think running backs are going to be more reliable than they are?
So it's twofold for me, and I think I'll do a quick promotion because it was an evergreen discussion. 2-3 weeks ago, we had Ben Gretsch on, Jacob and I on Beyond the Box Score, and we discussed this at large, like a 30,000-foot view discussion of what's happening in the NFL from this standpoint. And so it's 2-part for me, Heath. On the one hand, we are seeing such a massive change in how the NFL is playing right now, because as teams revert to this too high look with shell coverage and just keep everything underneath, daring teams to run the ball, teams are saying, all right, I will run the ball. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. That's the crazy part. And that's leading more NFL defenses to run more of these looks with 2 high safeties over the top, keeping everything underneath, because they're like, wow, we dare them to run. We set up the look where it's to run, but we win here with 1 gap. Like our defensive tackle gets to this gap first, and it's a blown run play. So it's like not even a guarantee that these run plays are going to be successful. So I continue to see the NFL move in that direction. So few coordinators left that are like the Wink Martindales of the league, or like the Brian Flores that are going to blitz a lot, play a lot of man. So with that said, the NFL will continue to move in that direction. Now that's the one side of it. The NFL's changing. There will be running the ball more. There's going to be more reason to lean on running backs in fantasy. The other side of this, Heath, is when we had that discussion, Ben brought up a great point. Heading into that week, and this is a crazy stat, I don't know if it still remains the same. I doubt it does. No, Christian McCaffrey's hurt now. But heading into that week, all of the top 23 drafted running backs were healthy for that week. That was 2 weeks ago. That is just the second part of the not drafting running backs argument. It's the anti-fragility argument. It's the lifespan. And for Dynasty, that's never going to change for me. One season where they stay healthy randomly is not going to alter my strategy. So I still think from that standpoint, it's hard for me to get excited about drafting running backs in Dynasty and really going all in there. Some of my assets that I have, Heath, I feel like are going to fall off from that standpoint. I'm kind of looking to trade. It's just because they're healthy now. So I don't think it changes my long-term plan. No.
I did. You mentioned the cover 2 in the shell, and I was trying to find the tweet, or it might have been on Blue Sky. I'm not sure where I saw it. I do this all the time. But basically, it was somebody had sent out yesterday that the NFL the last couple of weeks has basically stopped calling illegal man downfield on RPOs. Like there's
too many of them. Yeah,
they're just ignoring it. And I wondered, like, is that a really subtle way to kind of combat the too high shell coverage stuff? because it really reduces the efficiency if the people watching the lineman cannot decide whether it's a run or a pass based on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I thought they were calling it more earlier in the season than I had ever remembered. So maybe it's kind of an adjustment back from that. I don't know. There's different, like, so it's like, it's not only too high. It's like not only cover 2, the people, running cover 6 and cover 3. The whole point though is like it's underneath with a match principle defense. So it's like it's zone with man match, and it's requires a lot of communication on the back end, but reality is it's to keep everything in front of you, which is even on run plays or screen plays, you should have the ability to come up and make plays on that if your D-backs are physical and they're good tacklers and they can, wrap up and they play with good technique. So I don't know how the NFL really combats this from a passing standpoint, Heath. That's why I think the discussion is interesting, because it's like this may just be what our future looks like in football. Unless there's a major rule change. And in that case, there is more value for running backs in fantasy. It's just a matter of, in Dynasty, we view everything as more of an asset. And it's like that longevity standpoint for me.
So let's get to my rankings where Dan's going to help me out. And this is another guy that could have been in the has he changed your mind camp.
Okay.
Bo Nix has been a top 12 quarterback this year. I speculated back when he was drafted by the Broncos, like, this is a guy who comes into the league basically the age of an NFL veteran, who has done the short area passing stuff that Sean Payton loves throughout his career. He could just be such a better fit than Russell Wilson for this offense. And he has been. He's been better than I expected. I've got him at QB 15 in Dynasty, which is ahead of Bryce Young. It's ahead of Will Levis. It's a couple spots behind Drake May. Is this where Bo Nix belongs?
I think so, Heath. And I have to eat my crow on Bo Nix, because I was definitely the low man on Bo Nix. I will say this. I want to make it clear. Long term, I am not sold on Bo Nix. I have seen so many quarterbacks look good rookie season and then bad year 2, bad year 3. There's something that you'll hear from every defensive coordinator around the NFL, and it's that we need about 8 to 10 games of tape on a quarterback, and then we can adjust to the concepts they like to run. But with that said, I am much higher on him than I was before, and I think this is a fair ranking. I could even be convinced it might be a low ranking.
Well, because I want to go through some names here. So would you rather have Brock Purdy or Bo Nix?
Brock Purdy.
Would you rather have Trevor Lawrence or Bo Nix?
I'm never going to be able to quit Trevor Lawrence, so Trevor Lawrence.
Would you rather have Bo Nix or Tua?
Bo Nix for sure.
See, I've got it Purdy, Lawrence, Nix, Tua.
It sucks to say, but like from a dynasty standpoint with Tua, I don't know how much longer this career is gonna. It's crazy. I don't want to make that statement, but like it's one more hit and that's probably it. Like I right like.
I don't know. I thought that after the last one.
Yeah,
I thought that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So Anthony Richardson or Bo Nix.
Also, Mike McDaniel might be gone. That one's scary. Definitely Bo Nix over.
They extended Mike McDaniel through 2028.
I know, but we've seen things collapse and then
you said fired. Definitely Bo Nix or Anthony Richardson.
Bo Nix.
Okay. So
here's the thing with Bo Nix. He's done, even if teams do adjust to what they've seen from him on tape, he's done enough this year that he's guaranteed next year and probably the year after in this Sean Payton system. Because even if he struggles next year, they're going to argue that they can, they believe in him, they can get him back. And I'll be honest, like he's shown me a lot. There's some things that he's put on tape, like his intermediate level throws. That's where I've really seen the most from it. He's throwing with them with anticipation and he's putting a lot of velocity on them. He's also been 3 areas that I really like from Bo Nix. The intermediate throws on schedule from within the pocket. He's throwing them with anticipation and velocity. And he did show that a little bit at Oregon. The second is they're utilizing his ability to throw on the run. One thing I liked about his Oregon tape was he had the ability to throw off platform. He didn't need to be set, shoulders squared, and have that clean base. He was able to kind of, especially rolling to his right, he was able to kind of throw on the run. And Sean Payton's worked that into the playbook. He's worked that into the game plan. You saw that last night when he rolled right and then threw it back to his left. It was a little high for Sutton, but then they came back to that play and he made the play on the Sutton crosser where he throws back to his left and rips a ball in there in that intermediate range. And then finally, like I see some Drew Brees stuff, like how they use Brees. Like last night, they ran just like a quick hitch with whoever their tight end is now. I forget who he is. That like backup tight end that's now their starter. And it was like that way that Brees runs it. Like it's one quick drop. It's a 2-step drop, and he just rifles it in there. And it's like a good way to chew up 8-10 yards. And I remember Brees doing similar stuff to that. So there has been stuff I've liked from Bo Nix a lot. So I think I'd take him over Anthony Richardson. Yeah.
I mentioned Tyrone Tracy earlier at RB20 in my Dynasty rankings. I'll actually get them fully updated probably by Wednesday, and then we'll get those published. Well, they're always published. Good time to remind people, like if you go to the Dynasty landing page, there are articles for my quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end rankings. Those articles haven't been updated recently, but it says right at the top of the article, the spreadsheet's opened, is updated every Wednesday. That'll be the case again this week. Sometimes it's Thursday. But there's 3 rookie running backs that when I did the preliminary update ended back to back to back. Okay. Trey Benson, the guy we liked as the clear RB2 in this class, most people. But James Conner just got a contract extension. Tyrone Tracy, the guy who's been the second best rookie running back this year behind only Bucky Irving. But we talked about the risks with him. And then out of nowhere comes Isaac Guerendo. The double IR designation yesterday to Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason. If he's available on your waiver wire, whatever you have left in the budget,
throw it all,
is going to Isaac Guerendo. I think he might be a top 12 running back the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And he has the potential. Like, I don't know what Christian McCaffrey's status is going to be going into next year after all the injuries this year. How would you rank those 3 in Dynasty? Trey Benson, Isaac Guerendo, Tyrone Tracy.
I think from a Dynasty standpoint, Heath, I still have Trey Benson number 1. I'm looking at this more long-term. I'm leaning on the evaluation I had of these 3 players coming out. I could be argued into Tracy as RB1. Now, as far as Guerendo goes, he would be my RB3 of this bunch. Just long-term, they still committed to Christian McCaffrey from a salary standpoint, from a financial standpoint. I don't see that changing. Jordan Mason is a player who looked great on tape. He'll be back next year as well. Guerendo was an interesting case. He was the most athletic, basically, running back in the history of the combine when it comes to like the RAS score. But when you watched him on tape at Wisconsin or at Louisville, I think everybody who had watched him could tell you that he did not look like the most athletic running back in the history of the combine or anywhere close to that. He's looked okay at the NFL level. I don't think he's been phenomenal. So I'm not really huge on him long term. I think he's an interesting talent, but in a bad situation. The other 2 are in potentially better spots. Benson, not in the best spot, but the talent there stands out.
So it's really, well, and that's the other thing is like, I hear what you're saying. And Guerendo is also already 24 years old. So he's not like a young guy, but what is a top 12 running back for the fantasy playoffs worth? Like,
for Dynasty, yeah. It's
we're talking Dynasty, sure.
Yeah.
But if let's just say you've got a contender.
True.
I've got a contender. Somebody's got Guerendo on their practice squad and they're not competitive.
Right.
I would give up more for him than I would for Trey Benson or Tracy right now.
That's a fair case if you're in that spot and you need to win now.
So I think Guerendo, even though he's like
not Tracy though, because Tracy will get some points down the stretch.
You would rather have Tracy than Guerendo rest of season?
Not rest of season, but when I'm factoring in Dynasty, I'm trading for their future too. It's enough of I
don't know. I just don't know what Tracy's future is.
Yeah, it's true. It's murky.
It's so you would go Benson, then Tracy, then Guerendo.
I would go Benson, Tracy, and Guerendo, and I'm close to going Tracy over Benson.
And you would give up no more than a second for Guerendo if you were competitive?
2. Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to make an offer of a second. And we've got 3 wide receivers here. Rome Odunze versus Jordan Addison, who's been very good lately, versus Zay Flowers, who's been hot and cold this season. How would you rank those 3 wide receivers?
I'm going to go... Wow, this is an interesting one. I'm going to go Odunze, Flowers, and then Jordan Addison. Now, I'll say this. I talked about him beyond the box score Odunze yesterday, and some people interpreted that as me being down on him. I wasn't down on Odunze. The things that he does well on tape, as far as the contested catch situations, the nuance of playing wide receiver, he's continued and carried that over from Washington. The things that I've struggled with on tape is the speed. The speed to me doesn't look there. The athleticism that was on display at times of Washington when he had all that space to work with on the field side, the way DeBoer runs that system, hasn't been on display to me. So it's just raw speed and the athleticism to make big plays in fantasy. But from a PPR standpoint, from a red zone standpoint, where I thought he would be really the most dominant, I still think there's upside for him long term. And he's working with Caleb Williams, and I have a belief in Caleb Williams that he's going to be a really good player long term. So I'm locked in on that combo. Sorry, go ahead.
You do not want, if you want to believe in Caleb Williams, you do not want to watch a compilation of the last month of him throwing to Rome Odunze, because like he's made some plays to DJ Moore, he's made some plays to Keenan Allen. And it's been very frustrating because I've been pretty high on Odunze just on a week-to-week basis because the target share has been there, because I believe in the talent. And it seems like every time Caleb Williams throws the ball to him, it's 4 feet off path, or it's 175 miles an hour on an 8-yard pass. Like, it's been a very frustrating exercise. Those two, and I wonder if that's impacting Odunze, the speed that he's playing at, because he and Caleb Williams are just not on the same page. Like,
yeah,
they
there's
don't seem
no
to know
there.
What's going on together. So I have it Odunze, Addison, Flowers. I was a big Addison guy coming out. We had that weird thing mid-season where his dad was on social media complaining about his lack of involvement in the offense. And then the Vikings were like, okay, you started throwing it to him more.
Yeah.
He's been awesome ever since. So I don't know what to make of Zay Flowers. Let's get to tight end because we are running a little long, and I do want to get to some listener questions here. Dallas Goedert is my tight end 20, and that feels way too low. Except I don't know that he's a top 12 tight end on a week-to-week basis, and he's 29 years old.
Yeah.
So you're not making the case for Dallas. Like, the case for Dallas Goedert is Devontae Smith misses the fantasy playoffs and Goddard's healthy, and maybe he can help you win a championship.
That's the case. It's a short-term case, it appears, right? Because Devontae Smith is signed under contract. They extended him, and A.J. Brown, so that's not changing. There is also no volume in this passing offense for the Eagles. They've gone backwards from a passing volume standpoint. It helps them. It works. Barkley's unbelievable, but they don't throw the ball a lot, and it's going backwards each week. And there's no real reason to believe it's going to change because their defense is playing phenomenal football, which leads to their ability to just say, F it, let's run the ball with Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, and then take these shots one-on-one to A.J. Brown. That's like their entire offense is essentially just run.
It makes Dan so mad that it works.
It's hard to watch for me because I'm like, I agree with you that Jalen Hurts can be more than this. I saw it 2 years ago when they had that Super Bowl run against the Chiefs. They ran a regular offense, and it looked good to me. He was working concepts over the middle, on the outside, in the intermediate levels. I'm just not seeing that anymore, so it's hard for me to buy into Goddard long term.
I think the thing is that it's harder to run a regular pass offense because, well, we can say, yes, Jalen Hurts has all these great weapons. Mm-hmm. Very rarely this season has he had, maybe like 2 games, healthy. He had A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert all healthy, and their backups are awful.
Yeah.
They don't have backup level wide receivers. They're just terrible. Sorry, John.
I would argue, though, that like Bo Nix is running a rhythmic timing offense with no weapons outside of Courtland Sutton and a much worse O-line.
Yeah, no, I don't know about the offensive line part because Denver's offensive line is like compared to what we thought coming into the year. Yes,
it's better. It's not Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson at tackle, though. It's just not. No one has what the Eagles have.
But his pressure rate's actually been pretty high this year, which is kind of interesting. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
But okay, so let's take a quick break, and then I've got some questions for Dan. We got questions from the chat. We'll be right back.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
So I've got a handful of questions. Earlier this week on Blue Sky, I said Dan was coming on FFT Dynasty. The people had questions. I'm also going to get your questions in the chat. Nada does a great job of starring those for me. So if you have questions, we'll get to those after we get to these. First one was not for you. It was for me. Mike asks, what's the latest on the iguana situation? And Mike, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't updated recently because I don't know. We were able to remove 2 of them.
Oh, you have iguanas in the house?
I thought that was it. And then the next day I heard one above me in the ceiling. And so I cooked up my mixture of cayenne and garlic, which drives the iguana out. I haven't heard it since, but I can't close the hole until I'm certain that it's not there, because the last thing you want to do is close the iguana in the ceiling. So we're in a holding pattern right now until I see the iguana.
I have missed this. So do you have iguanas in your house, Heath?
Wow. Yeah. So I have had, it's been about a month now. I thought I had one, and it was a battle, and we finally were able to humanely get rid of that one and found a second one at the same time.
Are they
and got rid of that one?
Iguanas?
Oh, like you said, big iguanas, and then you showed, like, a lot of people are going to listen to this and not see it. You showed like a foot with your hands.
That would be big.
No,
these are bigger than that.
Oh, are we counting the tail or not?
Yeah.
So counting the tail, I think I probably had a 5-footer.
This would freak me
and a
out
3-footer.
if that was in my house. That would freak. Your kids good with this? That would freak me out.
It's in between the ceiling of my first floor and the floor of my second floor. So you never actually see it. You just hear it crawling above you.
Wow.
It's awful.
What is it doing in there?
Burrowing, making a nest. It's getting cold here in Florida, and it wants to be warm.
Oh, interesting. What do they eat up there?
Mangoes.
No, but
bananas.
when they're in between the roof of your head and the first.
Oh no, they just come and go.
Oh, he's coming in and out of the house.
Right. They didn't finish when they built this house 25 years ago, apparently, the soffit. And so it can just get up underneath there. So that's enough of the iguana update.
Really interesting.
Not great,
I'm
Mike.
interested. I would love to talk more, but not on this show. Later.
Not great, Mike. That's how it's going. We got a Bryce Young question. If he plays 80 to 90% as well the rest of the season as he has recently, is he worth a rookie first in the offseason or just a second?
In Superflex, I can be talked into a rookie first. Yeah.
Yep, I agree. How high is Malik Neighbors' ceiling in 2025 with Andy Dalton at quarterback and Mike McCarthy at head coach?
I guess this is a troll question for me. And I'm going to say, I'm going to answer it back with a troll answer, which is wide receiver 1 overall.
Yes, it was definitely what do we do if we've prepared for a full rebuild this year, but this draft class seems weak at quarterback? Do I trade to next year? Is Cam Ward worth it? Do I go after skill players?
I like trading for next year. So I would rather not put my eggs in the basket of Cam Ward or Shador for dynasty purposes. I could be talked into, if you think you're ready to compete, Ashton Genty, depending on the landing spot, if you have that opportunity. But with that said, I would love to trade and get into that 2026 class where we could be looking at Arch Manning. We could be looking at Nico Iamaleava, like players who I think have real upside from a quarterback standpoint in fantasy.
It is a great year for teams that are competing to trade 2026 firsts to teams that are that are rebuilding for 2025 first, because there's going to be plenty of running backs in the first round.
Yes,
I think for you to go get that will help your team, and there's a couple of wide receivers too. May even be one tight end if is it Loveland goes to the Chiefs to replace Travis Kelce.
Ooh.
Not that I'm manifesting that.
Wiley. We're still on Wiley. Me and Jacob are big Wiley guys.
I like Wiley, but this is the second ACL, and I don't even know if he's going to be okay next year. So sorry. What do you see as the future of Jameis Winston? Will he be a starter next year?
I think he will be. So here's my prediction with Jameis. I think he'll be a starter for either the Browns or hopefully my Giants.
I would love either one. The Giants are my first choice. Malik Neighbors with Jameis Winston might legitimately be.
It would be so fun.
Look legitimately be wide. We got a 12-team super flex. He has Caleb, Jaden, JJ McCarthy, and Bryce Young. Would you trade JJ for Rashee Rice? Probably looking at 2026 before I'm ready to compete.
What a question. Rashee Rice, what an interesting scenario this is for Dynasty, like where to value that asset. The suspension coming for Rashee Rice, we're going to say what? He's next year, the suspension is going to hit. It's not going to be pushed off again, right?
So here's the thing. I don't know, and I am not condoning anything that he's done.
Mm-hmm.
He has, to this point, suffered no legal consequences. He has not been convicted of anything.
Right.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know what the full story was. I don't know what he's told the league or if the league's even talked to him yet.
Right.
all I know are things that were speculated on in the media.
Yeah.
And so if I had to guess and set a line, I'd probably set it at 4.5 games for next year.
Yeah, for next year. And then it's like, I think I would do this trade, but it's obviously big speculation and big risk. Like the idea is you're potentially getting a player that is tied to Patrick Mahomes for a while and has already proven that he has a great rapport with Patrick Mahomes. Now it becomes it's tough for, are we really sure the Chiefs view him as part of their long-term
So here was my argument against what you just said.
Yeah.
It wasn't against Rice, because I do think that's true. But you're potentially getting a player that's tied to Justin Jefferson for the long term and an offense
even more so
that has made Sam Darnold look like a top 10 fantasy quarterback.
Right.
So I don't know. I prefer McCarthy to Rice, so I would need more than that to trade JJ McCarthy away.
I think McCarthy's more of a risk to me that he's going to actually be good at the NFL level.
I think you should be able to get Rashee Rice for Bryce Young, and I think I'd rather do that.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I like that idea. And if you have to throw in a second or something or third.
Is it bad form to be super active on waivers when eliminated from the playoffs? Absolutely not in Dynasty, not even kind of.
It's the beauty of Dynasty right there.
I will tell you, I don't even think in redraft, like you shouldn't be making trades. Last week, I spent $15 fab to add the Cowboys defense in our FFT Dynasty League where I was 3-8 so that I could knock Azer out of the playoffs. And it worked. So maybe that was bad form. Azer didn't seem very happy about it.
No, that's the best thing I've heard all week and potentially all year, and I cannot wait to talk with him about that.
I'm 12-1 and locked up a first-round bye, but I have Christian McCaffrey. Is it worth trading McCaffrey for Garindo straight up? Or should I just hold McCaffrey for next year? My other running backs are Mixon, Kamara, and Dobbins. Dan, you did not know this kind of smoke was coming for you on the show today. 29-year-old Christian McCaffrey with tendonitis in both of his Achilles, coming off of a knee injury.
PCL, yeah.
Or a 24-year-old Isaac Garindo, who's an athlete and not a running back. Flags fly forever.
They do. And it's well worth it to get that championship if you can. I mean, I just saw in all of my Dynasty leagues, people are putting McCaffrey up on the block, and it's like a panic mode right now. So it's like, but the way you describe it like that, Heath, like 29 years old, tendonitis, another knee injury. I think I might take this risk.
I will have Isaac Garindo ranked higher than Christian McCaffrey in my updated running back Dynasty rankings.
Okay, so then you have to take the trade if that's the case, right?
I would take the trade.
Crazy that I feel this way, but I do.
What do I do with Debo in Dynasty? I'm one seed out of the playoffs.
Oof. I mean, I don't think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I don't think Debo's a long-term fixture in San Fran based on their cap situation.
I also don't think the Debo we've seen this year. I don't think he's done.
No, agreed.
And so I would probably honestly be trying to find somebody else in the league who believed that same thing and see if I can get them to maybe swap veteran wide receivers. I'll take one that we think is going to be worse long-term. It's maybe a year or two older than Debo.
Yeah.
And they get somebody that's might not be very good this year. Look for a team that needs to rebuild that has a veteran wide receiver that you like more than Debo rest of the season.
I'm okay personally with moving on from Debo long term. I'm not a huge fan of his outlook dynasty wise.
What are your thoughts on A.D. Mitchell in Indianapolis? Man, does this guy get open? Man, does this guy not catch the football? What do you think about A.D. Mitchell in Dynasty going forward?
I mean, look, A.D. Mitchell was my wide receiver 4 in this class before the draft, just based on the tape. Phenomenal stuff at Texas as far as winning in the red zone, winning with off the line of scrimmage with his release, and then winning at the top of his route for his size, in addition to the long speed. All the traits you've kind of seen this year in Indianapolis. Now, this wasn't as much of an issue at Texas, but it appears to be a major issue now, which is like the hands, the concentration drops. I'm just going to go ahead and say that he's going to work at it and get better in that. He's got Reggie Wayne working with him in Indianapolis. And the one area of the field that I do kind of trust Anthony Richardson the most, if they stay with him, is on the deep lane, throwing those deep passes. He's weirdly more accurate deep than he is short and underneath. I don't understand that profile. One of the first times I've ever seen it in the NFL, Heath, but that appears to be what Anthony Richardson is so far, at least. So I'm still high on him. He's a player who I would be looking to trade for. He's a player who I'd be looking to keep if I had him on my roster.
So let's just talk about some of the young wide receivers here that you probably had behind him, and I just want to know if it's changed. Would you rather have Adonai Mitchell or Keon Coleman?
A.D. Mitchell for me.
Would you rather have Mitchell or Xavier Legette?
I'm starting to like what I see from Bryce, but I'm still going to go Mitchell.
Mitchell or Xavier Worthy?
Well, okay, let me just be clear about something. When I said wide receiver 4, by the way, I didn't mean dynasty or fantasy. I meant like overall rankings before the draft, before any landing spot, just based like
right. But
NFL.
You were saying amongst this rookie class,
yeah,
like you liked him more, I assume, than Worthy before Worthy landed in Kansas City, and then you liked Worthy more than him. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Yeah,
and I would guess you liked him more than Ladd.
Yes,
I would assume Ladd's passed him.
Ladd's passed him for sure, and I would say Worthy has passed him for me too. Worthy's role is starting to grow a little bit, and I'm liking what I'm seeing.
So I've got him at wide receiver 49 in Dynasty. I'm probably looking at some of the guys I have ahead of him. I'm probably about 5 spots lower than I would like to be, but I'm also
there's risk in this profile.
I think Anthony Richardson's starting all year next year, most likely. And
yeah, who else are they going to be able to get? Right.
Well, I mean, they could go get Jameis to back him up, and that would be a disaster. But that's the only thing I can think
so
of.
Fun in that Steichen offense.
Yes. Okay, Dan. Really always enjoy having you on. Appreciate you answering my rankings questions and the listeners' questions. Give everybody a little promo for Beyond the Box Score.
Yeah, always have a lot of fun. So anytime I can come on here, Heath, I would love to do it. And for Beyond the Box Score, it's a 2-week show now. We do the Monday show, Adam, myself, and Jacob. And now we've moved to Tuesdays. Jacob and I are doing solo pods, just us two. I shouldn't say solo, duo pods the rest of the season, just us two, where we can get into the nitty gritty of all the tape that we missed from Monday and some of the advanced stats. So if you're looking for advanced stats and tape and that kind of discussion from a fantasy standpoint, check us out on YouTube only, Beyond the Box Score. You'll find it there.
That will do it for FFG Dynasty. I'm Heath. He's Dan. Thank you, Nada. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions in the chat and listened
to the
like
podcast.
Button now. Hit the like button before you go. We will talk to you next Tuesday.